Okay, it is now 12:15, so we are going to get started, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is the March webinar in the Business Process Intelligence webinar series, which got started in 2018. So every month we've been offering a different topic just for a half hour over lunchtime. We've had some great feedback from this, and so we look forward to continuing the series throughout this year and hopefully for many more years to come. So today we are going to be discussing managing an effective team. Jeff will also be offering some tips and tools for managing a virtual team and just leading during a crisis, just because of the times that we're currently in at the moment. For those of you that aren't familiar with EZSigma, we just wanted to introduce you to ourselves by showing you our vision and mission. We have been around since 2000. We were the first Canadian organization to offer Canadian Lean Six Sigma training. Up until that point, everything had been coming out of the States, so we wanted to make it a little bit more applicable for businesses here. We're also the first organization in Canada to offer certification for both Lean and Six Sigma. So we're quite proud for those. We do primarily do consulting and training. All of our programs are available through e-learning, and we are now introducing virtual training. So if that is something that you are considering while you're at home right now, then definitely feel free to reach out to us anytime. The webinar is being facilitated today by Jeff Woods. Jeff, you can see his picture and a little bit of information about him. He is our primary facilitator for our training programs and for this series. He brings a wealth of experience to the table from many different industries, so I have no doubt that you will find what he's discussing today and some of the tips and tools he'll be bringing forward will be very helpful. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff, but just another reminder to please mute your phones or your mics on your computers just so that we don't have any background noise coming through. And Jeff, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, Liz. And just before we get started, I want to wish everyone health and safety in the times that we're in, and I would hope everyone's comfortable and able to adapt to their situation and be able to take care of themselves and those around them. So if we start today, we're going to talk about teams, and we want to look at such things as what makes teams effective. How much time do I have to spend? Like, is there a relationship there? Some tools and tips, effectively leading remote teams, and a little bit of comment around the topical things today around tips for leading teams in a time of crisis. And as we go through this, we can use it through a whole bunch of different lenses, because it can be a project team, it can be managing a permanent team, it can be picking up a new team. So there's lots of different ways, in the tools and how we approach things really are similar. They're just kind of coming through a little bit of a different angle. As I go through today, I will pause from time to time to see if anyone has any questions. Again, as Liz mentioned, you can always send her a chat question. But when I pause, you don't have to come on and say, nope, no questions. I'll just listen in, and I'll take silence for good to go, and then I'll just sort of keep going again. But give people an opportunity as we go through to make comment or ask questions. And of course, as time goes on, if you have anything in reflection, you can always reach out to Liz or myself anytime. We're always available and interested to hear comments or questions or anything that we can do to help support your learning at your organization. So defining an effective team, there's a number of different ways that we can kind of headline them within it. So thinking about it contextually, reliable leadership, what does that mean? Adaptability, what does that mean? Diversity, what does that mean? communication, and what does that mean? And so what people have the opportunity as you approach it is to step back and be mindful. Like everything we talk about in the training is that we plan for success, and if we think about what we need to be thinking about, it allows us to lay a roadmap in front of us for how we approach things. So, within these kind of 4 quadrants, there's certain things that you can look at. And what I recommend is you go into, again, whether it's into a new role with a new team, whether it's a project team as you're leading an initiative, large or small, whatever's going on in your organization. I mean, particularly today where you may have had an existing team and now how you're engaging is different because everyone's remote. You want to think about how you're approaching it and what the best method is to ensure that you're getting the most out of it and they're getting the most out of the occurrence, whether that's as a project team member or as a member of a permanent team. So you could look at this and envision sketching it out and personally scoring. Well, how do I think we are in regards to leadership and purpose, conflict, accountability? Where do I think we sit? And I'll show you some other tools as we go through this, but it's something that you can also, different ways hand out to your team, because it's one thing for you to think what people are thinking, but you really want to engage and find out how others are doing. And particularly in these times of change, where how you engage is changing and how you sort of get ideas and how you work together change, you're going to want to be constantly potentially, testing the water and thinking about, is it working for everybody? And so you want to go through and think of how you're approaching it, and then how do you know whether it's working? And so think of it purposefully going in, and then think of it reflectively. How am I going to know whether it's working or not? How much time do I need to spend with a team to make them effective? That really depends, because it's more about outcomes than in. But you want to think about things like how much time, how do I engage my team? How much effort is it going to take? How do I put that effort in there? How do I engage them? And step back and think, well, what's the current state of the teams? Where, is this a new team coming together? Is it an existing team? Have we worked together before? Kind of where are we in a scale going into it? Are we in a place where, it hasn't worked all that well in the past, I need to make it change? So part of this is going to depend upon what's your current status. Just like in a project, we talk about, well, what's the current metric and what's the gap between current state versus how well it's supposed to be performing. You can do the same thing with your own teams. Kind of, where are the gaps and how we're working, and how do we move forward to kind of close those gaps and become that high performing team that we need to be. And we'll talk about some tools to help with that. In the context of a project team selection is so important. It's like, choosing that team. Sometimes it gets overlooked. It's just like, let's who can we get in the room? But you really want to strategically be thinking about how you set yourself up for success. So do I have all the right people that are subject matter experts in the various issues? If I'm looking at a particular project, again, think of that SIPOC, supplier, input, process, output, customer, which is that quick tool that we use early in the define stage that helps us identify who needs to be in the room if we're going to be talking about something. So do I have all the right people? Do they have all the right skills? And again, making sure that you have subject matter experts, the people who do the work in the room, because they're the ones that know what's going on a project level. People that can think both strategically and tactically, that kind of understand what we do, but can also step back and think, well, what are we trying to accomplish, and look at it through a different lens. Able to think outside the box to come up with some creative thinking. Have respect of their peers and colleagues. You have the right people as you're moving forward and changing things. You're going to need to have that sort of that leverage of people being able to really work with others that are outside of their own areas. So, and again, sort of the contextual thing at the end here is, involve the lowest level of management as possible, the people that are really in the work, and then make sure that you kind of have that nice structure around different ideas, different personalities, different viewpoints. Sometimes you think about different people that have been there different lengths of time in the organization. So you may have someone who has that legacy thinking and someone else that's new and from a different industry even that has new ideas. And thinking about how to bring that together. Again, that's at a project level. I mean, we get that opportunity of choosing our team. Sometimes we have people who work for us and it's, well, that's who we're working with. And so you need to think about how do I engage them. Getting back to what I was talking about in the earlier slide around alignment in teams, one of the really important things is, and it's a tool that we have, is the GRPI, which is looking at goals, roles, process, and interpersonal. So different lenses of how we look at our team and how they're set up. And so you can really step back and go, okay, does the team have specific goals and objectives? Are people aware of the goals? Does everyone agree with the goals? Kind of that setting ourselves in that position. From a roles perspective, are everyone's roles clear? Do people know what their work is? Who does what? Are boundaries clear? From a process perspective, is there a team plan? Is the process well facilitated? What problem-solving process will the team use? And then interpersonally, when you're bringing a team together, what behaviors and norms do we all agree on? How are we going to resolve conflict? How will the team make decisions? And so you can see this as an important tool on a project, but this applies to every team. There's always an opportunity to sort of step back and to be thinking about it. And this particular tool, I think, is important as a 360 tool. So it's one thing for you as the lead to step back and go, what do I think, through these 9 different ways of how we look at things? How do I think we are and how we're engaging? But what's also important is to ask each member of the team to give their opinion. And again, depending on the structure of the organization, some people, you may want to do this as a blind exercise so that people will respond, but you don't know who said what. Or sometimes you want to know who so you can go and find out more, but you want to get honesty from people. So if people really don't know what's going on, you want them to be able to tell you that. And so the GRPI Matrix is great for that. So it basically is asking all those questions, and yourself, you can be looking at it and rating the project, but you can have all of the project team people give their gauge of where you're at. And this really gives you insight into what do you need to be thinking about and where do you need to shore things up on your project so that we're successful. Rather than waiting for things to go off the rails, you can get that immediate engagement and going, are we starting from the right place? And the nice thing about getting all the individuals to do it is that you can look for diversity. So does everybody think the same, or do you have certain people that think one part of the project is really clear and others that have no idea? Our roles and responsibilities clear? Do we know what we're trying to achieve, when we're trying to achieve it, how we're going to work together? So this is, in my opinion, and what I've seen, a great tool to use to sort of set yourself up for success. And again, this is something that you can use on a project, but you can use any team can be using these kind of things, and you're going to want to use these kind of things as you work with people, and particularly in a moment of change. Again, kind of a recurring theme through today's conversation is going to be the reality of most people are now working on remote teams and how that works. So you'll want to be reflective about, how am I engaging? Do people know what to do, when to do it? How are we in a new world managing conflict or questions, because you're not face to face, or even if you're using some visual tools, it's a different environment. And how do you make sure that you're giving everything that everybody needs to make this successful? Next slide is simply just sort of filling it out, right? So again, an example where it sort of shows you quickly kind of where do I need to be focusing to make sure, identifying weaknesses and being able to come up with plans to know what to do about it. And then you can go back and keep checking in with this. Are we on track, right? Did it work? You know, just because I asked at the beginning and though I did something about it, did it actually accomplish what I thought it was going to do? Just like in a project where we go back and we validate our metrics, we go back and validate that this actually, that worked, that people are feeling comfortable, that we're getting the most out of our team. Again, so important for success is to have that cohesive, well-working team, whether that's a project team, again, or our team at work, permanent team, or whatever that is that you're working with. Great tool to help with that. So before I move on, any questions so far or any comments on using that or a similar tool that people have had in their experience? Again, I'll pause for a moment. You don't need to jump on the line and say no questions, but if you have anything, you can either send a chat to Liz or bring comment now. I'll just pause for a moment. So if we think about this, a lot of this is around what can I do as a leader? What can I do, whether that's, again, leading an organization, leading a division within an organization, leading a team, whatever you're doing, what skills, what attributes, how do I want to present myself? How can I engage to make sure that things are working properly so that I can engage my teams? And so this is sort of a nice slide of, again, things to be thinking about. You know, consider each team member's ideas as valuable. And again, what's important as you're reading these things is to be going, well, of course I would, but am I actually, are those the behaviors that I'm showing? Right? And again, think about that through visual cues, through comments, through anytime there's an opportunity to say thank you or to highlight the good work of a team member that you're doing that. And so again, the more we can be overt in our way of how we approach things, the better we can manage things. So again, be aware of team members' unspoken feelings. You know, how are we going to do that? And again, in today's world where we're more virtual, how am I even going to know? What am I going to do as a lead to make sure that I understand what people are thinking, what they're feeling? You know, so how can I engage them? How can I draw it out of them? Maintain focus on team's higher goals. Again, on a project level, it's really important because often there's conflicting things going on in the organization. There's lots of work going on. So how do I keep the team focused on what we're trying to achieve? And again, all of these things, I think you can really simply look through a project lens and an organizational lens based on what's going on today. Be clear when communicating, right? Communication, as we know and talk about, is so important. So how do I communicate and how do I validate that people heard what I was saying and understood what I was saying? You know, so how do I get that feedback loop going so that I know that people heard what I was trying to say? Encourage trust, right? Encourage team members to share information. How do you make it an open thing? And that doesn't mean, well, tell me everything that's great. How do we share information when it's not great? How do I make sure that I have good open lines of communication? So if something's slipping, somebody is open to be saying, hey, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here, or this, I was supposed to have this done, or I'm having trouble doing something. How do I make sure there's really good open communication both ways, and of the positive and not so positive nature? Because it's easy for everyone to be talking about what's good. How do I make sure that things that are slipping or challenges are being brought up immediately so that we can mitigate any negative aspects of it? Again, let the team work on creative solutions, facilitate communication, evaluate team performance, provide feedback individually and as a group. Again, it's always good to give praise in a group and give constructive criticism individually. And sometimes we get that backwards. And it's really important that that we think about what we're saying, how we're saying it, when we're saying it. Make sure there's good, clear ways of evaluating team performance. Using consensus, setting expectations, and coming back to like listening and encouraging creativity. So all the different things that you're going to want to be thinking about all the time. And often, you know, you can have things up on your walls, right? And that's what I do. I've got sort of different sayings, different ideas, different thoughts that are always kind of, remember this, talk about that. Different ways of helping yourself be successful. And really this leads to you're sharpening your own saw. How can you continually look better? And the reason I have this slide is it's something that I'll often do in training sessions is, you know, think about someone who you've met or you've worked with sometime in your career that was absolutely awesome. You know, that person that, you know, whether it's from a leadership perspective, you know, you'd like to work with them, or if they were leading a project, you'd like to be on that project, or whatever it is. Think about those characteristics of those inspirational leaders and what are they, right? And so you can do this yourself and write them down, or I'll often do it in a class session, as I say, and have everybody kind of putting that collective around what are all those things. And then the purpose of this is then think about, well, how do I think I score around that? You know, how am I about being bold? How am I about, you know, listening and be aware of the big picture? All the different sort of components that make up those characteristics. What can I do consciously to continue to make myself better in that direction? And it's just a really, in my opinion, it's a sort of a great overt way of making sure that we're making ourselves and those around us better every day. Next thing to think about is, again, whether it's a project, just as you might be leading a project in an organizational change and you've got the whole organizational transition who's going through the uncertainty, skepticism, exploration, commitment, that works for teams too. I mean, the individual team is uncertain coming together, you know, and how do you work with a new team? Or in times of change, like we're in right now, how do I kind of work with people? So this picture kind of walks us through some of the ideas around what we see kind of on the plus side on top and on the more negative side on the bottom around excitement versus confusion, frustration, creativity versus anxiety, accomplishment versus unsure or ambivalent. So again, something to be thinking about, and where do you see the team? How are you actively moving people through this, whether again it's on an individual project or organizationally moving people through kind of those kind of norming, storming phases of a project. I'm going to pause for a moment and just do a check-in. If anyone has any questions. Gives me a chance to have a drink of water. This slide, again, how do I effectively lead a remote team? A lot of people are going through this for the first time right now. You know, your teams are at home. You know, how well were we structured and organized before around tasks and duties and how we did things and what we did and how we kind of coordinated and worked as a group and a team, and recognizing that at this point, you know, some of you will be super busy depending on the business that you're in, depending on the role that you played. You're going to be somewhere between, you know, very, very engaged and busy to not so much. And then there's some unfortunate people that kind of can't do what they do right now. And so there are lots of people are in different states of flux. But I want to kind of bring this back to, if I'm leading that remote team, think about it while understanding your team members. Kind of when's the best time to be engaging them. And, remote team, there's two different ways of looking at that. One is kind of, well, if business is normal managing a remote team, and then business is not normal, like today in managing a newly remote team. But if these things kind of work on both factors, but you want to think about when's their best time to be engaging you. In today's world, it's a matter of understanding, what are their home commitments? Are there times that they can be, actively work on things, and times when they have other commitments? Think about different ways that you can communicate through texting, chatting, video conferencing. Get that virtual face-to-face contact by using video conferencing if you can, and different sort of tools. Lots of different tools out there. Flexibility with call times outside typical business hours with a remote team. Think about the time zones that people are in. So often remote teams are, you're spread across the country, across the world, whatever, and you take that into consideration. I spent a lot of time in my career, I was managing a team in Mauritius, which is an island off the coast of Madagascar. And so the time zones were basically opposite. And so their day was our night was their day, which was kind of the beauty of how we worked process. But it also meant that I'd set my clock and get up at 3 in the morning so I could have a call with them, because it fit their business time for us to find out how things went that day, versus trying to have all of them work to my schedule. So kind of look at, where your team is, how that works, and different times of when you can be communicating. Manage expectations. Again, things should be around outcomes and output, not presenteeism or hours put in. So an important thing to be thinking about is kind of, do we have, good dashboards and good ways of measuring and knowing what's going on? So that whole idea of being outcome based and output based is you're going to get a good understanding of kind of how your organization works today, and how do I make sure that, since I can't see the person, I know that the work's getting done, because that's what really matters, is the effort that comes out of the work. Things to be thinking around: active listening skills. Again, in virtual, where you're away, how do I make sure I understand what's going on with my team? Again, communication is key. This slide is one from our deck on, again, from a project perspective. In my mind, a good communication strategy is either something that is wind in the sails of your ship, of your project, or else it's an anchor off the back that's dragging you down. So if you have a good communication strategy, it really drives the success of your project. Here we have it talking about key stakeholders. What do they need to know? Why, what, when, how, who's going to do it? And building that communication plan is really, really important. And you can do the same thing from a team perspective. Like, think about the various people on the team. Who needs to know what? How are you going to communicate things? What is the different timing? So again, all these tools work. They're templates, and templates are meant to be, here's a starting point, and now let me work and adjust it to what I need to accomplish. So, the construct is the same, but you may change the topics or the pieces within it depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But tools are there to help you get to the next step in whatever you're trying to accomplish, or to help you understand where you are. RACI, same thing. You can use a RACI chart on your project, so to understand everybody knows what their task is, what their role is, what they play. Also on a process that you're working on, you may leave often the reason the process doesn't work isn't so much that the process itself isn't well laid out, but it's ill-defined about who's supposed to do what, who's responsible, who's accountable. And sometimes when you go in to look at an area, just by clarifying the role fixes the problem or improves a bunch of the problem. And again, a RACI is a good thing to be using within your own team and your own that you're working with. So again, whether it's a project or your organization, getting that clarity of everybody knowing kind of what they're doing, who's doing what's my expectation. What you'll find is a lot of uncertainty around, am I doing that? Is somebody else doing it? Am I supposed to do it? Well, I thought you were doing it. And so you really want to get that clarity tightened up. And then I want to kind of come back to leading during a time of crisis, which we're in right now, and that key step around empathy. Like right now, surveys going out are talking from a leadership perspective of empathy is so important. You know, how are people doing? You know, how, you know, understanding. Right now, everyone's looking at themselves first, and they need to be. And so once they feel comfortable and feel that alignment back to the organization, then they're able to sort of get back to work and do the things that need to be done, but really kind of understand that everyone's in a different situation. And how do you align what needs to get done with the reality of what people can be giving and who can give what, when. And that could be different hours, that could be different, lots of different ways you can look at things to get the outcomes that you need. Communication, again, at this time, at all times, really important to communicate, consistency, clear messaging, making people understand what's going on, and open lines of communication so you can hear from your staff. Make it easy to understand what their concerns, what their challenges are. You know, how can we work together to get things done? Again, decisive yet flexible. You need to make sure that there's a clear path of what we need to get done, but how we get there is open. But we know we need to get to where we need to get to. And that works, again, that's the same as a project, that's the same today. And these are all great learning business practices and personal learning practices that no matter how good we are, could always be better. And so this is an opportunity for us to really be working on it. And that's listed here. I've got a couple different resources, the places you can go. But that pretty much brings us to the end of the deck. Open it up for questions, again, whether you have something you want to ask or whether you want to send a chat or whether you want to send an email follow-up to us. I'll just pause for a moment.
Thank you, Jeff. Just while people are digesting all that information, just wanted to, again, for those of you that aren't as familiar with us, let you know some of the training options that we do have available. As mentioned, all of our Lean Six Sigma courses are available online. All of the certification exams are also available online. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out anytime. We do also offer virtual coaching and consulting services, which again, you can reach out to myself directly or to info@EZSigmaGroup.com. This webinar has been recorded, so you will also be receiving a notification where you can access the webinar. If you'd like to take a look at it or share it with any of your colleagues in the future, you're more than welcome to do that. And so I will open up the, again, if you have any questions, and just as you're considering that, these are some of the topics that we do have on the table for 2020. If there are any other topics that you would love to hear us speak about, definitely let us know. We are definitely open to that. These were some of the recommendations that we received from participants from 2019. So, Jeff, thank you again for taking the time to spend with us this afternoon. And we will remain on the line for a few more minutes if any questions have come up. If not, have a wonderful afternoon and please continue to remain safe and healthy. Thank you.